Season 3, Episode 23, Decoded Podcast. Rolland Chidiak and Chris Clough coming at you this morning, this fine Saturday morning, where like basically the last time we spoke, I feel like the world has been flipped upside down a couple of times, Clough.
Mm-hmm.
You agree with that?
So just to reiterate, I guess, so that was last week.
Oh, yes. I can't wait to see what it looks like this week.
That was last week. And I wouldn't necessarily say that I was channeling anything specific. Despite the shape and the look.
I want to say, despite the shape and the look. So if I'm looking a little more tired than usual, it's because our on-ramp was amazing. It was you fed my soul this morning, Chris. So thanks for that. I appreciate it.
Did you want to return to it at all?
Well, like,
let's see if we circle back at some point naturally.
Well, let me just hit the highlights because for, the people listening, they might be like, these guys keep talking about this on-ramp, but they never really give us anything. So let me give you something. So the on-ramp started with just like here, and this is my perspective of the on-ramp. I'm just happy that I get to do this, that I get to chat with Clough. I get to see you because I haven't. Oh, sorry, everybody. I keep looking down to my right because that's where the camera normally is. I moved the camera up here, top left. So I haven't seen any people this week. Like, we've been going for a family walk every day, so we see people on the street, but we stay away from them and we don't know them. So to actually see you is pretty cool, actually. And Chris and I had like a FaceTime yesterday, so it was cool to see you and your kids and your house and stuff. It was just neat. So it started with I needed to see somebody. So I was relieved that this technology still works and that we could chat and see each other. But then, like, we talked about, our work as teachers and what it might look like if we became principals one day. And we had a great chat about that flow, what's holding us back, what's pushing us forward, things like that.
Can I jump in? It's funny to hear you say the holding back. I don't know if is it okay. So, and it's one way to shape that would be holding back. The other side is just like what's holding me. Holding back almost has like a negative connotation to it. And you might not be suggesting that might not be your POV, but for me, I really it kind of comes back to like what's holding me now and why I like it, why I kind of like it. And that idea of being held and just supported, is really what, if I'm no longer being held by it, it's because I've chosen to leave it. And that's, a little bit, that's sort of like the tension. That's the tension for me. Just that idea that somehow you walk away from something good. Could build something next. Could be something good next. That is possible. But
I like that.
Yeah, entirely aware that what I got now is really good.
Okay, and fair enough. And I really like what you just said. I love that you jumped in with that. What's holding you? What's holding us, right? And anyway, that conversation, that back and forth was awesome because we were diving into our personal lives. We were diving into our past. We were diving into how we see the future. And it was like a holistic conversation. And that's kind of I'm feeling tired from it because we really went deep. Like, I talked about some stuff that I don't normally talk about. So I got to go deep. But I'm also like revived. I'm feeling good. And I told you in the middle of the conversation, you had said some things to me that made me feel like elation. I felt good. I feel good about my position. I feel good about what's holding me and what I'm holding on to right now. And that's important.
That's a good way to put it. Days. I like that. Not holding back. What are you holding on to?
What's holding you? It doesn't have to be bad if something's holding you. Like you just said, what you've got right now is good, and that's holding you. It's propping you up, and it's got you supported. And based on that, you choose to pivot and which way to go or to not go. And that's all good. So anyway, that's kind of what we were talking about, and it's led us into this episode 23. And I think I'm going to shift a little bit, because unless you, and you'll come back to this, I know you will, if there's something about the on-ramp that you feel you need to elaborate on publicly, go nuts. But I want to talk about, this past week has been very interesting. This past week has been very interesting because I think, man, it really is true that every day something's changing. Like this whole pandemic is shifting fast. Like every day there's a new shift. And I feel like with the Prime Minister talking to the country every day, and then the Premier talking to us like, I don't know, twice in a week or whatever, it feels like things are shifting. And things are starting to tighten up as we move forward with this pandemic. And I wasn't feeling well this week, so I had caught what my wife had, and so I was feeling like, really tired, coughing a lot, and just not feeling alive. So I feel like my week has been spent trying to get better and holding on to like hope of, you're not going to be sick forever. You will improve. You will be able to like enjoy the time that you have forced upon you with your family, type of thing. And I was starting to feel a little bit more alive yesterday, but the night before, so Thursday night, I was, as I was telling you, I was in bed and I was down and out, but I wasn't ready to fall asleep yet. I needed something to hold on to. So I was searching for podcast episodes to listen to. And I really wanted to listen to a podcast that I knew was coming out, but I didn't know when it was coming out. And it's called Read Into This. And it's a podcast about books, articles, fiction, nonfiction, graphic novels, like all kinds of texts. And the hosts, their approach or their purpose is to explore how they read things, what they read, and how it helps them like make sense of the world. And it's not a podcast that I would normally listen to, but the hosts I'm connected with, you're connected with on social media. They're part of our PLN. So it's Alana King, it's Beth Lyons, and it's Lisa Noble. And so Thursday, I was feeling like, where is this podcast? Because I heard through the grapevine that it was going to come to fruition. And when I heard it was going to come from fruition, it was maybe a couple of weeks ago. So I thought, okay, has this happened? So I reached out to Beth. I said, is your podcast out yet? I'd like to listen to it. And I ended up listening to something else and falling asleep before she got back to me. But she got back to me, she gave me the link to the episode, and I listened to it yesterday. And I have to tell you, Chris, as someone who doesn't consider himself a reader, and we can go deeper into that, just like I'm not a math person, I was excited to listen to these three put together what we do every week. And I know what it does for me, this podcast. I know what it does for me personally. And so I was excited to hear what they would do and to kind of tune into and try to grab onto some of the chemistry that they're building as they do their podcast. So I listened to their first episode and I really enjoyed it. In fact, I purposely tweeted out as I was listening to it because I kind of wanted to. I've been doing that lately and I've been really enjoying that. I feel like it does a couple of things. I feel like it helps me with my learning and to like grasp onto things that resonate with me and get me thinking. I also feel like if somebody else stumbles across the thread, they might want to listen to this too, or they might want to interact with me about some of the things I've said, or they might want to interact with the people hosting the podcast about some of the things that I said that they said. So I think there's different layers of it, and I really enjoy that part of it. So anyway, listening to their podcast, I was tweeting out about the stuff that I was hearing, and I was asking questions about it and stuff. And I felt like, and I tweeted out that it was Listening to their podcast yesterday was fascinating to me. It was fascinating because I rarely sit in a room with three people who are talking about reading books and what reading is and what type of texts are more important than others and how people view those things. It was fascinating. It was like I was a fly on the wall, and I kind of was, because they're talking and they don't know I'm there, but I'm listening. It was refreshing.
I'll say
And
too, I think that's what, that's one of those secret sauce kind of moments. I don't know if it's something that you can distill and make happen, but if the viewer, the listener, gets the sense like they're just kind of listening in, it's the it's the upside to voyeurism. Let's say, like, if you feel like you really are just listening in on a great conversation, not necessarily, you may recognize there could be some scripting in the background, there could be some planning, there could be mapping, that can all happen in conversation, but the fact that the energy of the conversation and the flow of the conversation and the direction of the conversation gives you the sense like you're listening in on something intimate and something real. It doesn't feel simple. It doesn't feel safe. It doesn't feel pretentious. And I mean, it doesn't feel safe in a good way. Like at any moment, you're like, oh, wow. Like you kind of get the tingles of hearing something that you wouldn't expect to hear. And I don't mean doesn't make you feel safe as in you feel like you're like you're being, like there's anything predatory about it, but it just, you don't feel safe necessarily because you really are kind of listening in at the door and you're like, oh, wow, this is a really cool combo. And the fragility of it. I think there's also an element of fragility, as that if you were to sort of like jump in, you would lose a little bit of that. Like all of a sudden people are like, oh, there's other people in the room. So just wanted to mention that. I think that's cool. And not all audio gets there. Not all video gets there. Some of it goes too far, right? It just gets too almost non sequitur, like what is going on, and this, gets too down the path of a personal art project. But I dig that, where all of a sudden you feel like you've been included, but you weren't necessarily asked to be there, but you feel included.
they did that. In my opinion, their first episode, they did that. And this is the best part of it is, dude, there is no way in a million years that I'd be listening to a podcast about reading and literacy and libraries. Sorry, that's not me. But I'll tell you what is me is that because these three people are in my PLN, because I value their professional opinions and perspectives, I was really feeling like I wanted to support it. I wanted to, hey, you're putting together a podcast? Wild. I'll listen to your first episode. And I don't mean that as in I'm not going to listen anymore. I'm just saying, like, I was really looking forward to listening to what they were going to do, what they had to say. And I love that. I love that about that. The fact that this is not content that, like, it's not content that I'm into directly. But because of the three people running it, I dove headfirst into it. So much so that I'm telling you, like, I was listening to it on one device, then on my other device, I was tweeting my thinking, my questions, my ideas, my perspective. So I was taking it seriously. It was like a little mini personal project at that moment in time. And I have to tell you that, in my opinion, I do believe Alana, Beth, and Lisa had a thing going, and I liked it. I really liked it. And like you're saying, they were able to do something, which shows you that they're more than just three people podcasting. They obviously have relationships and they're cool with each other, and I could feel the vibe between the three of them. I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing what they do next. But it's the beauty of it is that I did not come to this podcast because I have interest in books and fiction and nonfiction and all that. I don't. It's the people. And so because of those people, I dove into what they were talking about. And now, because of the back and forth on Twitter with a few people, I'm thinking about what is my problem with fiction text? What is my problem? And the problem with me looking at my problems is it's gonna force me to go deep, and it's gonna force me to dive into areas of me that I probably, I shut that door, locked it, and tossed the key a long time ago, and now I'm gonna jump in, and why not, right? Like, it's gonna be hard, it's gonna bother me, and I've already been thinking about it. I've unlocked the door and kind of peeked in, and I already see some of the problems. And let me just give you one. It's a teacher school related problem, so it's kind of cool. It fits with our podcast. But I remember, well, there's a couple of things. So I've never read fiction for fun. And I think it's because learning how to read was difficult for me, and comprehension of text is still an issue for me. So, um, I don't technically have a learning disability there, but there's definitely issues with my comprehension. So for me, I never saw reading fiction as fun. I just didn't. So like in school, SARS, is that no Sears, whatever, sit down and read. I can't remember what sit self
Dear.
USSR or whatever.
Oh, I heard a dear
Uninterrupted.
drop. Oh, see, I would have known it as dear. Drop everything and read.
We had USSR.
Wow.
Anyway, those I dreaded those times. I didn't want to sit and read for 20 minutes. That was going to kill me. So moving forward, right? So if I dig back to elementary, it wasn't my thing. It wasn't my thing. I didn't want to do it. I probably thought reading was hard and comprehension wasn't good. Move that into high school. The BS that they had us reading in high school, the fiction, just it didn't. There was no connection. I made no connection to the nonsense I was reading, The Great Gatsby and all that stuff. It didn't mean anything to me. It was just, you got to do this to pass the course. I didn't like it. And then it was grade 12, advanced English. We had to stand up in front of the class and do a presentation. And I did my presentation, and it was a topic I got to pick. So the cool thing about it was the topic I chose interested me. And it was about, strangely enough, it was about the Canadian military at the time and how the Canadian Airborne Regiment was being disbanded because of some of the things that the airborne soldiers had done in Africa that were really horrendous. And so that was a topic I chose, and I stood in front of the class and I talked about it. And I remember people like snickering and laughing at me while I was presenting. And I remember the teacher not giving me any praise for my work, but I do remember watching some of my best friends up there doing their presentation, and the teacher was just salivating over their stuff. Like, I remember those things and what made me feel so bad about being in that class. And then near the end of the term, my grade 12 advanced English teacher said to me, I was at her desk and we were talking about my presentation, kind of like a conference. Excuse me. And she said to me, if you promise me that you won't take grade 13 English at school next year, I will pass you. I will give you the grade 12 advanced credit, but you have to promise me that you won't take grade 13 English here. And I said yes, because it sounded like if I said no, I wasn't going to pass grade 12 English no matter what I did. So thankfully I had a moment, like what's the I can't even think of what the word is. I had an adult moment.
Epiphany.
Where I had to think. Yeah, I had to pivot, and I had to think about my future and I could have said no to her, but then I knew that I was guaranteed to fail the class. She wasn't going to pass me, and she had the power to do that. So I'm like, yeah, of course I won't take it here. So I take it in summer school. And again, I'm reading books. So I think in that month of summer school, we had to read 3 novels. Like it was packed, jam packed, like a novel a week. And I remember I came into class and I handed in my work to the teacher, and she was I don't remember her name, but she was a brand new teacher. So I guess this is the only gig she could get, right? So if you think about it, I'm like 17 and she's probably only like 23 or 24 or something. So not far off from me. So she was able to connect with us. But I remember handing in my work, and right before one of the recesses, she gave me back an assignment, and I looked at it and I was devastated. I got like a 65% on it. And it was all comprehension type questions, long form answers and stuff about the chapter. And the recess bell rang, and everybody went outside, and I walked up to her. I said, "Can I talk to you?" And she said, "Yeah, of course." So I sat down and I said, I'm struggling. Like, I don't understand. I don't understand why I'm not doing well. And she said something like, "Well, you're not doing the work." And I looked at her and I said, this was another moment, like an adult moment where Rolland wasn't just a stupid 17-year-old. He was like, it's like God hit fast forward and made me 27 so that I could have this conversation with this person. And I said, "I don't understand. What do you mean I'm not doing the work?" And she said, "Well, look at your answers." So like she opened up my paper and she's like, "Here, there's a question about John such and such during this moment in the story of his life." And I was like, and she said, "Look at how you answered it. It shows that you didn't read the chapter." And I was like, okay, those are fighting words. So then that's when I said to her, "Listen, you need to understand where I'm coming from here. This is my world. I come to school every day. I work my tail off with you and in the math class that I'm doing in the afternoon all day. Then I go home and I spend all night reading this stupid book and answering these stupid questions. I'm not hanging out with my buddies. I'm not on the phone." There wasn't really computers at the time. There were, but whatever. I was like, "I don't know what you think I'm doing." And then I started to tell her about the chapter. I'm like, "I don't give a you know what about Joe's whatever during this time, just because this happened to him, this happened to him." So as I'm talking to her, she's looking at me like, "You did read the chapter?" I'm like, "Yeah, I read it every night. I go home and I spend my night doing this nonsense. The only reason I'm doing it is because I have to go to university or else my life is worthless." And she's like, "Oh, you do understand what's happening in the book?" I'm like, "Yeah. So why am I not getting the marks for it?" And the look on her face, it was like, holy cow, like you just gave me all the answers by talking to me, not by writing any of it down. And I said, "This is my frustration. I'm doing exactly what you're telling me to do. But I'm getting back and I'm reading things I don't want to read. They're killing me. I don't want to read this nonsense. It means nothing to me." And she's like, "Okay, we're going to shift gears." And so for the next, I think 2 weeks, she was very good with me. She was like, I'd hand in my work and like she would spend a little bit more time talking to me about it. Because I know she was going home marking like crazy, right? So she would talk to me about it, and I found myself in for like I wouldn't leave the room for recess. I'd kind of hang around, and she'd talk to me about it, and I'd tell her about the chapter and what I liked and what I didn't like and why it took me so long. And anyway, so if we go back, that's where I've been. My headspace has been there since I listened to this podcast about why I'm so bothered with fiction text. And it's because it tortured me. I have no interest in it. And man, like it kills me. Like just explaining to you, going back and talking to you about that stuff. When I got to university, I didn't take any English courses. I was scared of them. Because I had to read some BS fiction story and then write an essay about whatever about it. And it scared me. I didn't want to fail. I wanted to succeed. So I took law and I took psych, and I was able to write stuff that I really enjoyed. And I remember my first law essay that I wrote, I got like a B. And I went back to the high school and I showed her my work. And I'm like, "You said I couldn't write. I can write. I just can't write the way you wanted me to write. And it kills me that you told me that you were going to fail me. It kills me that you did not want me in your OAC class. But, man, the silver lining is I went to university and I kicked butt. And to this day, I use what she did to me as fuel to propel me. So I don't care who you are, where you come from. You can tell me that I'm not going to do something. And if I want to do it, you can stand in my way. And I'll basically crush you. Or you can move out of the way and just let me be. I'm closing that door again. So that's what happens when I listen to podcasts.
It's a good wraparound. It's a good wraparound.
So I would just want to say thanks, Alana, Beth, and Lisa. You're on, buddy.
Well, I think I saw a part of that. That thread, and I saw there was sometimes, depending if you don't expand the threads, you could just kind of jump. You kind of leap from bit to bit, like trying to figure out what was discussed. But I think there was. I'll assume that in there was some mention about whether or not you're going to be a part of their podcast. Was there an ask or something like that, or part of the discussion? Because I actually, what I saw in there was, I think I saw your comment was just like, it'll probably be a very short discussion.
Yeah, Beth said something about, we can talk about my issue with fiction, or what I read. And yeah, my response was, that's going to be a quick chat.
I think you just gave them an amazing leap-off point, at least for self-reflection about what does enforcement look like and what do obstacles look like in reading. Kind of like what gets squeezed out on the sides there. You know, I mean, you've shared, we've had parts of this conversation previously. You've spoken to the, not only sort of like the sort of challenges that you'd had in school, but the results, like where that kind of built you, like where that took you. It wasn't just sort of anchoring to a moment. It's like, here's how I turn this into something. And I always appreciate getting an extra layer of that from you. It does, you know, it halts you because you bring it back to how it brings me back to moments where I know I've told kids how to do school, either by my action, my reaction, or the absence of, right? Like just not having a thing to be able to help them reframe whatever the moment they're going through is. Take that into the classroom as a teacher then. Because there's always we haven't been in this conversation in a long time, but maybe this is a moment just to kind of bring this back in. There is the saying out there about you are the student that you're still connected to that part of yourself as a teacher. You may even go further to say that connection, if it's holding you, you know, kind of where we started here, like the value of that experience, if it's not holding you back, but it's actually still holding you, what parts of that do you notice in your class, or are you sort of aware of moving into your reading circles or your sort of like in-class experience with the kiddos and their sort of looking to see themselves in you. They're looking to see themselves in the books. They're looking to see, that guidance. How do we move forward with this particular text or whatever? How does it inform you and the kids?
Well, I'm really happy that you kind of went in that direction, because as you were talking about it, I was thinking about the things, how the what I just shared with you and what it's done to me as a teacher. So, for example, I I I think as a teacher, I look at reading as an avenue to build your capacity for whatever it is you want to do. So, when I teach reading to my students, and when I talk to them about my reading and how to read, because in grade 2 they're learning, and grade 3 they're supposed to be mastering how to read in order to read to learn. And but they're not, because in my school I have lots of newcomers, and there's lots of gaps. There's lots of gaps in their learning and their knowledge and where they're at as readers and writers and mathematicians and all that good stuff. But so for me, reading looks different than someone who, I don't know, loves it. It's necessary. So kids should learn how to do it. And my approach has always been, I don't care what you read, and I don't care what you want to read, if it's, as long as it's appropriate. In my classroom, I try to make the reading experience not like it was for me. So we do have self-selected reading time, but I recognize that for some kids that's going to break them. It's going to break them. And so what I do is I find, 3 or 4 of them that will break if they do it, and I put them together, and I let them not have self-selected reading time. I let them buddy read. Let them read to each other. And the funniest thing is when they'll say to me, but I don't know how to read. I'm like, well, come here for a second. And they sit beside me, and I'm like, let's open this book and let's take a look at the pictures. And we start having a conversation. And next thing you know, I say to the kid, you know that you just read those 3 pages to me, right? And they're like, what do you mean? I don't know what the words say. I said, but you looked at the pictures and you made connections, and you told me what you see in the pictures and what you think is going to happen next. And you tell me why you think these characters are doing this, or why the setting is where it is. So like, you are reading, you're doing the things that readers do. And that's what I need you to do. I need you to keep doing that. I need you to like it. So do what you need to do to like it and to enjoy your time. And I want you to do it with so-and-so, because they're just like you. They're learning just like you. And then they'll say to me, but I want to be like so-and-so who's reading a novel over there. I'm like, that's not who you are. You need to be you. And one day you will, if you want to read that type of thing, then you will. But right now you're here, and this is who you are. And I try to bring them back to who they are, because they always want to be something else. That reminds me of me when I was that age. And I try to take them back. If they need it, I try to do it. I try to tell them, hey, I wasn't always what you see here. I was just like you.
Or still are just like them. And I don't mean that negatively. I just mean that's what I think. That's what I think. The sort of like the holding of those pieces, and still staying connected with, staying connected to the path that brought you here. And to say that this, to sort of recognize, to be able to here's the gift that you have in this, is being able to recognize the difference between a student wanting to get better or improve or learn, and a student that just wants to be somebody else. Like they just want to arrive at that spot. They think that that reader over there is who they should be, or that group of readers over there, or who they should be with. And to be able to stay in that moment with the kid and help them understand that there may be a path to that place, or just doing what you're doing right now is okay too. I mean, you can insert any curriculum, any curricular pursuit into there. But if we're talking about the reading, which so much of it seems to happen invisibly, then I think it's a powerful reminder to any educator about what it means just to stay in that moment, stay in that space, and to remind a kid it's okay to stay there. This isn't me stopping you from moving forward as intensively or as energetically as you want to, but you're doing this thing. You're reading too. So
my view on reading is just because I see it as such a sore spot for me.
Mm-hmm.
I see the pain in their face. Some of them. Now, some of them don't have that pain. Some of them pick up that book and they run to the corner and they're gone until I call them back. And that's great. I love it. I love it. Go do your job. But the ones that resist, I try to find, I sit them down. If they need the chat, I give it to them. And I try to do it as humanistic as possible. Like it, sometimes when I tell them the compliance that I require is that you're going to practice the strategies I'm teaching you. That's going to make you a better reader. That's the compliance piece. And I need that because that's what I'm using to educate them. That's what I'm using to assess and evaluate them. I need it. But I don't need them to pretend to read in a corner. I need them to genuinely practice the strategy. So if that means that you're going to do it with somebody sitting beside you who feels the same about their confidence is low or they can't speak the language, they have no clue what they're doing, then that's fine. I'm not going to hammer you for that. And they know that now. You want to see me hammer you? Go into the corner and start messing around. I'm all over you then. You'll pay. There will be consequences for that. But for you to acknowledge, for you to sit with me and acknowledge where you are at as a reader based on my assessment of your reading skills using my balanced literacy assessment measures and talking to you about your perspective of reading and whether you like it or not, where you do it, how you do it, whatever. You sitting with me there, I got no problem. You're not going to get hammered there. That's what I need to help you grow. And I celebrate every time, they come to me and we do a reading record. I celebrate their achievement. They're all improving in their way. Some are improving faster than others, and that's what learning is. I have no issue with that. So, and I think they get it. And it's funny. I probably shouldn't say this online, but I'm going to say it anyway. There are, in the balanced literacy assessment measures that I have, there's a protocol for ESL and ELL students. And I think some of my colleagues hate that I follow that protocol to a T because, what I see as following the protocol, they probably see as me being lazy. So there are some assessment measures that should be used and should not be used depending on where an ESL or an ELL student is on their on the step or the level they're at with respect to the ESL curriculum documents and stuff like that. And one of my kids, he arrived in November, and he's the hockey kid. He's the student that came from Africa who fell in love with hockey right away. And so obviously right there we have a connection because he sees the pictures of my kids, on my desk of wearing their hockey gear and stuff. And so he talks to me about hockey and I talk to him about hockey. And he said to me the other day before the March break, he said, why I not read with you? Why you not sit down with me, you read with me? Because he sees me with the big binder and he sees me doing the assessments and stuff. I said to him, well, you do read with me. But he says, why I not read those books? And he's pointing at um, the literacy binder with all the leveled books in them. I said, well, because those books are not going to help me understand you as a reader yet. And he's like, why? I said, well, you just got to Canada, and Miss Soulard, the ESL teacher, her and I talked about where you were at when you got here, and we don't think that that's the right place to start. And he kind of gave me this look, and I knew what the look was. The look was, enough with your BS, sit down, get one of those books out, and let me give it a shot. And I said, let's do it, right? So by all accounts and measures, this kid I should not be taking him through this protocol. But guess what? He wants to do it. And I know him good enough now that I know this isn't going to crush him, right? So if I give him a level 10 book and he can't read it, and then I drop down to a 5, it's not going to crush him. He's going to be like, whatever. Okay, thanks. You let me do it. I'm moving on. Well, guess what? I give him a 10. The kid crushes the 10. No decoding issues, total comprehension, relatively good fluency. Okay. Here's a 15. Crushes it. Couple of some decoding issues, but not enough for me to say that it's hard. Not even instructional level. It was easy for him according to the literacy assessment. Fluency's still good. Comprehension's great. I'm like, okay. So now it's like a competition. So now he's looking at me. He's like, bring it on. And I'm like, this next book's gonna crush you. So this is where I'm at now with this kid, right? I give him like a 24. Decoding is instructional level. Comprehension is like so. Fluency's still kind of okay. So I'm like, okay. So he goes, how did I do? I said, well, 24 was starting to push you hard. So I would stop there. I would even probably drop to a 23 just because you don't really know what you're doing. Like I need to be confident with what I'm doing with you. So he's like, okay. So he gets up and he leaves. The ESL teacher comes in, and I'm like, brace yourself, because she's a rule follower, like a 100%. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I love that about her. And I'm like, I just did something I shouldn't have done. And the look of horror on her face, right? Because she's not just thinking I broke the protocol. She's like, did you damage one of the kids? Like, I'm like, no, there's no damage. And so I tell her who I did it with, and she's like, oh, yeah, he's pretty resilient. He's a confident dude. He's a risk taker. He loves school. He loves like the interactions here. He's eating all this stuff up. So I tell her what I did, and she's just like, that is friggin' awesome. I said, so I did it. We're going to pretend like it never happened. But it was pretty cool that he gave me the green light to do it. Whereas some of the other ESL kids, they're like, they look at that binder and they are happy that they're not sitting down with me doing the same type of literacy assessments that I'm doing with a lot of the other students. They're happy because they look at that binder and they feel defeated already. And my response to them is, you will sit with me with this binder when it is time. I will only do with you what I think you are ready to do. That doesn't mean I'm not going to push you in that direction. I'm constantly pushing you. So I see where you're at. I see where you're comfortable. And then I'm nudging you forward because I need you to feel uncomfortable. And I always point to the learning pit and I show them you need to get uncomfortable in order to become comfortable with something. So I will keep pushing you, but I will only do it based on where you're at. I'm not going to push you so far to break you. I'm only going to push you to keep you uncomfortable, to keep you learning. That's my job. And when I tell them about me as a reader and me as an ESL learner and me as a student who didn't always like the subjects that I was learning, I always tell them, I want you to remember that. And I want you to remember that I'm always going to do what I can to meet you halfway. But then you need to meet me halfway. So I'm going to do my part. And when I don't, I want you to call me on it. And they do. And that reminds me to reel it in, Rolland. Don't be who you're not. Be who you are. Remember, you're in a privileged position. And I don't know if I've mentioned this to you before, but I feel very privileged to be a teacher, and not only to be a teacher, but to be a teacher with primary students. I feel it is a huge honor. I don't think people get it. I'm entrusted with, around 20 young people every day, and I'm in charge of making sure that they're fed, that they can think, that they're feeling safe, that they belong. I don't think people get that responsibility, and maybe they don't care, and that's fine, but it's huge for me. That is huge. I've been entrusted with these people, these kids, and I know that it doesn't always go well. I know some of them have left my class and think I'm horrible. I get it. I don't want it, but I know it happens. Just like I'm sure my teachers didn't want me to leave feeling like I was hated, but I did leave feeling that way. And instead of, sitting in the dump all the time, I use it to empower me. And I'm glad it happened because it gives me the boost I need to push through and crush what's in front of me. I don't know if I would have had that drive if it didn't happen to me. So some kids leave. They don't like what they did. Some parents don't like how I operate. What I say to them is, I'm not purposely operating in a way that is meant to cause difficulty. There's a method to my madness, and most of my administrators have trusted me and let me do my job. And the ones who didn't trust me, I didn't trust them either. And so there was never a relationship built there. Since I'm there, I think those administrators wanted compliance 100% of the time. They never wanted to talk about anything or to consider different avenues. The administrators that let me do my job, they give me the framework. They say, here's the framework. You work within it. And that's what I do. And they let me do it. And there's a trust built there. So that's how I brought what I've experienced as a kid with my reading into my classroom with my students. And at this particular school, I seem to be dealing with a lot more students that remind me of me. And I think overall it's a good thing. I don't know. I've been thinking lately about how long I'll be able to do this. When I got to this school, a lot of the colleagues I trust and admire and inspire me, they've worked at this school as well. And they've all given me the same message about this school. They've all said, there is a shelf life at this school. You can't stay at this school for more than this many amount of years. It will take too much out of you. And I respect what they say and I take what they say. I don't necessarily I'm open to the fact that it might not fit with me, right? Maybe what they experience won't be what I experience, but I do not neglect their words. I do understand why they tell me that there is a shelf life at this school. I do understand. I just feel like right now it flows really well with where I'm at in my life, and it flows really well with what I'm up to, and that's good. And as long as that flow is there, it's good. And I've been at schools where things have been hunky-dory one year, and then the next year you're like, it's time for me to leave now. I get that. I'm not feeling that yet. I'm not feeling that. And I've been at many schools. And you and I were talking about this yesterday, the evolution of someone. And I like to be able to pin it to different places, right? So when I think of the schools I've been at, I can pin my development in those places. And before we started, we were on the on-ramp, we were talking about principalship and administration. We talked briefly about the fact that I had gotten my PQP Part 1 in 2006, and I didn't get PQP Part 2 until 2016. So it took me 10 years to go back to that realm of risk-taking and wanting to sit down face-to-face in a course and to do the work that needed to be done in order to get some of that the knowledge and skills necessary to move in that direction. But I tell you that when I think back to 2006, I was much more of a risk taker in terms of like, I was much more of a, I see what I want and I'm going to go get it. And I didn't think about the collateral damage of that, right? And I didn't think about the people around me and my life circumstances. All I thought about is, that's what I want and I'm going to go get it. And so I see myself as more of an immature educator at that time. But then I fast forward to 2016 and I think about taking PQP Part 2 and I pin that on where I was at that time. And 2016, much more mature, many more scars, from like my teaching profession scars and my like regular life scars, many more scars, much more experience, more mature. And I had the gift of seeing that the course as not, oh, I got to take the course to become a principal. I saw it as what an amazing opportunity to collaborate with colleagues I respect, to be instructed by a principal that I have much love and respect for. I only got to work with him for 1 year, but I'll never forget that year. And an opportunity to look at leadership as a next stage in my career. And so it's amazing to look at those two pins 10 years apart and to reflect on the difference between Rolland in 2006 and Rolland in 2016. Amazing growth. And that's just one example of pinning myself at. So I love that I've been at different schools and I love what I've been able to get and learn during those times at those different schools. Not everybody can say that. And I see that as a really cool part of my professional growth.
Thank you, podcast that you listen to. What's the title of it? I thought that their cast was going to come out and it was going to be called Talk Wordy to Me.
Apparently that was taken.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
I know.
Damn.
It would have added like a whole other layer of intrigue. But you know what? I like what they got. Read into this. I like it. Yeah, see, what makes it hard to listen again is that is it going to keep doing this to me? Because like I'm exhausted.
Yeah, but you're exhausted for the right reasons, dude.
True.
Like
I'm exhausted for the right reasons.
Yeah, this is the kind of stuff like this is the like the I don't know, it's like that the way sleep feels after spending the day outside walking in fresh air, like it's a totally different feel. And I think, just to land for a second on reflective practice, like what you're working through is like time travel, and it is fatiguing. Like if you're able to draw a line between your experience, and this is kind of what blows, like I don't have that kind of connectedness with my memory of being in high school and learning when I was at a younger age. I don't have I can't conjure the stories of challenge like you do. Now, dude, like I was part of the privilege. Maybe I was part of that group that you were seeing across the room, or like your kids in your class were seeing across the room. I just picked up the book and I ran, right? Not only that, I was the one making the decisions like, yeah, I'm not liking this book, so I'm just going to read this book. Like I had the agility to flip between different fluencies. I didn't have to I didn't have to sort of stay focused to the page, and because the moment that I closed the book, the story stopped. Like my brain had the capacity to stay tethered to that, right? But I think that the reflective, the value of what you sort of ultimately work through as a result or connected to their podcast, like that's a blog post wouldn't do it justice. I think there's some real value in you saying these words outside your head, possibly somebody finding this, like yet again, that Easter egg kind of a thing, someone finding it and then going, wow, someone else has a story that I've never been able to put words to. So I think it's very cool. Very cool. And
Thanks.
and kudos to you for sort of like going into that space and holding yourself accountable to it. Right? Just staying there until you feel like you've got a little bit of a glimpse of it. Stuff's going to pop up again. I know we've sort of talked in bits and pieces about the life of Rolland as a student, but every time I feel like there's another layer of kind of like experiential learning, and not necessarily the type of experiential learning that that does no harm. Because I also got the sense of the emotionality of this too. Like it's just there's rawness that you can just go back to almost instantly.
It's another podcast I was listening to. Basically, the guest was saying that it's in those times where you learn about yourself and you are fueled to move forward. And I'm starting now to come like to not fight that so much, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I am bothered that I had to experience, some of that suffering, and maybe suffering's a strong word. That I'm bothered that I had to have such a crappy school experience to help me become a better learner now. Like it sucks, but it doesn't suck. And I'm starting to come to terms with that doesn't suck because look at what it's doing now. Mm-hmm. And everything about it is so weird. Like, so my parents were not confident with their English. My parents were not educated. So they would literally send me to school, literally just send me to school and be like, okay, go there and do what you're told.
Yeah.
Not like some of the parents today who you make a call about a bad experience, and then you're instead of the response of, we're really sorry that this happened. We're going to talk to our daughter about this, and we're going to figure out what's going on. We're going to work towards changing the behavior, and we're going to contact you and let you know what we learn and how you can help, or how we can help at home. Instead, I get, well, this is what this person did here. And I'm like, that's fine. I'm not ignoring what happened. I'm just telling you, this is what I saw from your child, and it's unacceptable. You get this pushback. And I'm not saying pushback is bad, but what I'm saying is my parents weren't going to push back at all. My parents were just going to take what they got, and I was going to be disciplined for it. And now, fortunately, I wasn't a bad kid. I wasn't bad at school. So they weren't getting that. But I always knew at school, I'm screwed. Like, nobody's here to help me. So imagine going to school every day knowing that no matter what happens in the building, my parents are always going to support the people who are running this building for whatever reason. Be it not, grateful to be in the country and just so happy you're going to school that you're just going to go and comply. Or, they can't speak English. So like, how are they going to communicate? They can take in information, but they can't give it back. And just feeling like my parents had more important things to do than my homework. My dad had to work. to survive, to have a place for us to live. My mom stayed at home for the first chunk of my life. So she was cooking, cleaning, laundry, like doing all the stereotypical stuff that moms would do back then. And then in the second part of my life, the high school part, my mom was always at work and so was my dad. And I have, like, as I tell you this, I remember coming home from school, getting off the bus at like 4 o'clock. My brother would go to wherever he would go and my sister would go to wherever she'd go. And I'd go into the kitchen and I'd make myself an omelet for dinner. I'd make myself an omelet and I'd sit at the kitchen table and I would eat my omelet. And I can see it and I can remember thinking, my sister's over there, my brother's over there, my dad's at work, my mom's at work. I don't know who cooked for my brother. It wasn't me. And I don't know who cooked for my sister because it wasn't me. That was my reality. That was my reality. So now my mom did defend me. Okay, I got a great story for you. I know that we've hit the hour mark, but I have to give my mom props because I'm about to share with you a difficult experience to share because I feel shame, because it was not responsible of me, because it's not how you want to show yourself to the world, right? But here it is. And it's true and it's part of my story, so I own it. I get to high school, okay? So I went to, in Ottawa, it was K-6 was elementary. And then there were some 7 and 8 schools, but most of them were 7 to 13. So when I went to grade 7, I went to high school, but I was sectioned off in a corner and people just ignored us. So I went to high school, and the closest one was like half an hour away in the country near where I grew up, where my mom still lives. And in grade 8, a bunch of us didn't want to stay at the high school we were at. We wanted to go to a high school in the city. It was a popular high school, and they wouldn't just let you transfer high school, so you had to have a good reason. So the reason we used was that school had a photography class in grade 9 and 10. And so we would just say, we would fill out the form and say we want to transfer because we want to take a photography course, and you don't offer it at your school. And it worked, and I transferred schools. But what I found is that in grade 9, I wasn't happy. The friends I transferred with, they had made new friends. I was in none of their classes, but they seemed to be in the same classes together. So I was literally on my own. And now that I think about it, I can connect that high school being alone experience right back to elementary. Being alone, by myself, nobody with me, nobody here to help me. And I struggled. I didn't do well. I wasn't going to do well, and I started skipping school. And I was skipping a lot of school. And I basically skipped and failed almost all of my grade 9 year. Now, fortunately, there was summer school. So I went to summer school. I did 2 credits. And then grade 10 started, and I continued to skip. And I finally got caught. Now, before I get to being caught, grade 10 advanced English. My English teacher was horrible to me. Horrible to me. Now, mind you, I was taking an academic class, and everybody told me to take, what was it called at the time? It was called advanced. I was probably supposed to take general courses, but my dad said to me, you're taking all advanced courses. My son's not going to take general courses. You can't get in university with general courses.
Yep.
My dad was sending me to university no matter what at this point. I didn't even know what I wanted, but that's where I was going. She treated me horribly. When I was in class, she would kind of make fun of me here and there or whatever. And I wore a baseball cap when I was in high school all the time. And my New York Mets cap, I loved it. I wore it all the time. And when I walked into her class, if I didn't have my hat off, then she would kick me. Like, she would say to me, like, if I took a step in and my hat was on, it got to the point where she'd tell me, get out of the classroom. You're not coming in my classroom today. And I would say, okay. And I would literally leave the room and I would sit right outside the door so that you couldn't tell me. Now, I did skip her class a lot, so I wasn't there a lot. I skipped it a lot. But when I was there, she would kick me out and I would sit right outside the door. I would just leave. So I have to tell you that about her because she's part of the story and what my mom did to stand up for me. So that class was horrible. I hated every minute of it. I didn't do much work in it. I skipped a lot of it. So one day, I don't remember what class I was in. I got called to the office. I went to the office, and the guidance counselor, I can't remember his name at the moment, but his mom was my elementary school principal. He said to me, do you know why you're here? And I said, no. And he said, let's go for a walk. So we went outside, we walked around the quad, and he said to me, we know you've been skipping a lot of school. When we get back to the office, I'm going to show you a piece of paper, and basically it was a graph. It was awesome. It was a line graph, and you could see the pattern of my skipping. It was beautiful math, really. And the computer finally picked it up. And I think it's because I wanted to get caught at that point. I basically skipped 2 years of school. I was like, I needed help and I didn't know how to get help. So as we're walking, he tells me, you're going to be in my office and the vice principal's going to come in and the vice principal's pissed. Like you're going to get hammered. We're going to call your parents. And I said, okay. And I was literally like, I felt, it was really weird. I felt like relief, but I also felt like, you guys got nothing on my dad. If you think your nonsense of discipline's gonna hurt me, do what you want with me. If I come back to school tomorrow, it's a miracle. So anyway, go back to guidance. We sit down, he shows me the graph, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful, right? Like, I'm like, holy cow. I got really...
Let me just put in, Rolland is drawing in the air, peaks and valleys. Yeah, almost looks like he's conducting things right now. So yeah, there we go.
So he shows it to me, and he says, okay, the VP's going to come in. And there were two VPs at the school. One of them was Arab, actually. Which was cool that I'd see him and he'd kind of give me a nod because we're from the same people. It was the white principal who was coming in to deal with me. So he comes in, he does a little bit of yelling because, he's got to show he's the authority figure. He's got to tell me what I've done is wrong. Then he calls my mom on speakerphone and he tells my mom, your son's been skipping school. And I'm laughing. I'm like, I don't even think she knows what that means. But basically he says he's not been in school a lot. And we're not going to suspend him. They didn't suspend me. They gave me after school detention for the rest of the school year, which was about maybe 2.5 or 3 months. Every day after school, I go to the office for 45 minutes to an hour. And I just sit there. And so... They tell me, they send me back to class, and I go back to class, and I'm just a shell of a human, right? Like, because I know my dad's probably going to kill me. I failed basically 2 years of school. It's not looking good, right? It's not looking good. So I get home, and we had people visiting from Lebanon, and they were staying at my house. So I realized, okay, my father can't kill me because we've got my cousins here. So I get home and my mom tells me my dad's going to talk to me. So I go up to my dad's room and I'm like, I'm now outside of my body, and I'm just staring down at the skeletal remains of me. I'm looking at myself. And my dad comes in, and I'm seriously expecting a beating. And my dad did not beat me. A couple of times I got whooped. He did a couple of things to me over the course of the time that we were together, but I was like, I'm gonna pay, and I think I was okay with it. Like, I think the anticipation of the punishment was killing me more than the punishment was gonna kill me. So my dad sits on the bed, and I'm kind of sitting on the bed too, and he says to me, he says, I don't know what I'm gonna do with you. Silence, right? Then he starts crying. I'm like, you got to start hitting me soon.
Because stuff is falling apart here.
Oh,
like this
Jesus.
is, yeah, this is stuff is falling apart.
And I'm still up here looking down, and
Yep.
I'm like, when's it gonna happen? Like, I'm like, we just get this over with? And that was it. So I leave the room, and I'm like, baffled, right? Like, wow, the card he played there was like, that came out of nowhere. So then I go back to school. Man, and the next day I had to take the city bus and get on the city bus, and it's packed. And guess who's sitting across from me on the city bus? The VP that did this to me. Well, sorry, I did it to myself, but the VP that was hammering me, the white dude, he's sitting there. And I'm like, shit, now I got to take the bus with the vice principal. Like, this is killing me, right? So I get to school, and I don't know how long it was, maybe a week. Every day after school, I sit down. I go to the office, and the secretaries were great. Hey, Rolland, how are you? I'm good, thank you. And I just literally sit in the chair and just sit there. And it was probably like, a week and a half later, I walk into the grade 10 advanced English class. And at this point, all my teachers knew that I had skipped their classes and stuff. And she was mad because she didn't catch me, right? So, like, she was mad. She was like, you skipped my class on purpose. And then I find out from the VP that you've been skipping my class. And I was like, there was nothing left of me. So I was like, tough. I'm back now, and I'm not skipping now. So we're stuck with each other. It was kind of like a moment where I was like, I got nothing to lose. I've lost it all. So now you're going to suffer because of it. So you can tell she's not happy that she didn't catch me. I was caught by somebody else. So then the next day after that little chat we have, I walk into the room and my hat wasn't on, and she said, get out of my classroom. And I said, okay. So I walked out, and and by this point, all my friends, or I don't even know if you could call them friends, all the people in the classroom that were sympathetic and empathetic were like looking around like, why are you kicking him out? Like, he just walked in. Like, they were like looking at me like, you're going into the hall. And I'm like, she told me to get out. And my hat wasn't even, I was holding my hat. Like, I took my hat off when I walked into the porta pack. And so I literally sat right outside the door. Literally, my knees were up on my chest, and I was listening to what she was teaching. And then when the bell rang, I left. And then the next day I came back, and I walked in, and she said, get out of my class. And I said, okay. So I came out, and I sat down again, and I thought it's over now. Like, every day I go to the office, I sit there for an hour. My dad won't even talk to me. So I go home. I say to my mom, every day this lady kicks me out. She's like, well, what are you doing wrong? And I tell her, like, I don't even have the chance to do anything wrong. I take my hat off when I walk into the porta pack, get down the hall, walk in the room. I'm not with anybody. I'm not talking to anybody. And she says, get out of my class. So my mom's looking at me like, dude, you got no game left. Like, what are you doing? I'm like, Mom, I'm going to tell you just one more time, then I'll just let it go. I get to class. She tells me to get out of the class. My mom says, well, what do you do then? I said, I walk outside the door and I sit right beside the door. So if the door's open, I can still hear what's happening. So I'm there, like I'm not skipping. I'm right there at the door. And I said to her, like, I said something like, I got nothing left, Mom. I got nothing left. Like, I'm not messing around. I can't even go to English class. She won't let me in. And I think in that moment, my mom, she could see I wasn't messing around. So she said, I'll call the school tomorrow and I'll talk to the vice principal. And she made a point of telling me she was going to talk to Mr. Karam. The Arab vice principal. So I go to English class. I walk in. Teacher tells me to get out. So I go out. I sit at the door. Halfway through the class, the phone rings. They answer it. And then somebody comes to the door and says, hey, Rolland, because they all know I'm sitting at the door. They're like, you need to go to the office. Like, okay. Does she know? And they're like, yeah, she told us to tell you to go to the office. So go into the office. I sit down in the vice principal's room and he says, what's going on? He says, your mom called. So I tell him, since I got caught skipping, I had a chat with the English teacher. And ever since then, when I get to class, she tells me to get out of the class. And I leave, but I sit outside the door because there's nowhere for me to go. And I'm certainly not going to skip any more classes. So he's like, so what do you do? And I'm like, I sit at the door. He says, you sit at the door? I said, yeah. He goes, how long has this been happening? I said, well, I think this is the 4th day. Because on the 3rd day, I told my mom, and I'm talking to you, and he goes, so you weren't in class right now? I said, no, I was sitting outside the door. They came to the door and they told me to come see you. He goes, okay. And I don't remember what happened next. I think like he said, I'll talk to her or whatever. And then the next day I went back into class and I walked in. She didn't say anything to me. And I sat in the back somewhere. And then I, like for the rest of the grade 10 advanced English, every day I would come and I would sit, and I didn't really participate. I didn't want to. I mean, I thought the whole thing was BS. Everything they were doing, I didn't like. I didn't want to do. I mean, but if I was asked to do something, I'd do it. And if I had homework, I'd do it. But like in class, I wasn't going to raise my hand and start talking about the book or whatever we were doing. I did have to do a public speech. I did it on Wayne Gretzky. It sucked. People laughed at me, which is like, you know, I didn't put any effort into it, so it really did suck. I finished out the year, and then I remember my father saying to me when he did talk to me, he's like, you're going back to your old high school. This experiment is not working. You're going back. And I was like, yeah, bring it on. Let's go. I don't want to be at this school anymore anyway. And then when we went back to my old high school to register, the vice principal there, she was a piece of work. My sister had joined me as well at the new high school. When I was in grade 10, she was in grade 9. She wasn't doing well in school either. So my dad was like, you guys are, both of you are nimwits. You're going back. And I remember being in the VP's office with my sister and my dad, and she was like, basically like, you know, I don't have to accept you, right? Which I know now is whatever. Both my sister and I were just sitting there like, say what you need to say, do what you need to do. We're coming back. Where are the papers for my dad to sign? Like, why are we playing these stupid games? And then, you know, that was the year that I decided I needed to do something with my life, and everything changed. But everything didn't change because then I told you my grade 12 advanced English story. And so the theme continues, but I had a little bit more like resilience built into me. So maybe that's a little bit of why I don't want to read fiction. I don't want to write about something fake that happened in a book. But most importantly, get in front of me and tell me that I can't do something. Because once you do that, the game's on. So it's almost like I look for those moments now where I present to somebody what I want to do, and instead of looking for the people who are going to support me, I pinpoint the one. That tells me it's not going to happen. And then I use that as my fuel. To blow right past them. That's the story. That's why it's sometimes so scary for me to take on projects or new learning, because once I pinpoint, for good or for bad, the one or two people that say to me, it's not happening, or you suck, or you don't have the capacity, those things are kind of dangerous to me. Because once I'm set on a path, of something that I want to do, nothing's going to stop me. And I know you and I have talked about some of the personal projects I've been on over the past, 4 or 5 years. And some of them have been physical projects. And I don't know if I ever like presented to you some of the physical stuff, the physical exertion stuff I've done, that I've even gone to the lengths of, I'm either going to do it or it's going to physically kill me. But I would rather die trying to do it than not trying at all. And to most people, you'd think, well, why would somebody want to harm themselves? And it's not about harm. It's about, it's the path. I've put myself on the path, and too many people have told me that I wouldn't be able to do it. And that is the fuel I've used all this time to be able to do the things that I've been wanting to do. And I'm very clear and I'm very aware of the things that I've stopped doing because I've chosen to stop doing them, not because somebody else has chosen for me to stop doing them. So as a teacher, I hope that I'm not the fuel for some of my kids learning in a negative way. But if I am, then use it and go to the moon. Do something awesome with it. So that podcast episode has led to this podcast episode. So maybe someone could see why I'm just not going to pick up a fictional text and sit down and read it for pleasure. I know that the two things I'm talking about are so far apart, but they're really not. It boils down to some experiences in English class, actually. Not in math or science or religion. I skipped those classes too, but English. And being like English as my second language and not having parental guidance, like it just rolls all into one big ball of, this is what you have sitting in front of you now. This is who I am. And I don't want to be like, I'm not wanting to be like, oh, I had a shitty upbringing or whatever. That's not like what I'm trying to do. There are experiences and there's many more things. I just have put them away and I don't want to deal with them because they're too painful. They're too painful. And the opportunity to bring them up does not provide itself, right? Like, I'm not sitting with a therapist once a week bringing this stuff up, so it's just not going to come. It's not going to come. But there's so much. So when I see these kids in my class, it all boils down to, can they just be comfortable? Because behind that comfort or discomfort is all this stuff. And I know I have a job to do. And I know there's a curriculum. But for goodness sake, I don't remember any of the curriculum I had in grade 10 English and grade 12 English. I just remember being told, essentially, like, you're not good enough. You can't do this. So I do everything I can to not give that to my students. And when I do, I give it with context. I say to them, whoa, you're being really lazy here with this. What's going on here? Then they'll tell you, I don't like it. I'm like, fair enough, you don't like it. What can we do to spice it up? Because what I need you to do, I need you to build some skills here. I know you're not going to remember this math later on. I get it. But right now, you're here with me. This is what's happening here with me. And what we're doing here is we're building. You're building your foundation for when you're 43 years old. And you have your own podcast and you're talking to your buddy about your progress in life. where you were, where you came from, where you are now, what you want to do. It doesn't have to be horrible. You don't have to use negative experiences to fuel your energy forward. Use the positive stuff. All I know is I'm built to look for that one person. I almost kind of need it now. Somebody step up and tell me I suck. Please tell me I can't do it. Because if I want to do it that bad, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it better than you. And I'm more mature now to rub it in your face, but I'll talk about it. Now, this podcast episode has been kind of deep, so I want to drop a little bit of funny, and then you can talk if you want. We can do whatever you want. So I went back to my old high school, and in grade 11 that year, school was ending early. It was ending at the beginning of May because they were building onto my school. So I was going to have a 4-month summer. So I got a job at the local grocery store down the street from my house, and I was a packer. That was my main job, to pack groceries into bags. And whenever my grade 10 advanced English teacher would come into grocery shop, she would come to the cash I was at. And the minute that I would finish packing, the person I packed their food, I put it in their cart, and the minute they rolled away and she came and she put her stuff on the belt, I would go to another cashier to pack for them, or I would switch off with another packer. So I would say to whoever was beside me, can I take your till and you take mine? And at first they were like, no, I'm fine here. I'm like, please, can we switch? And we'd switch, and then after I would tell them. And so now all my buddies were, can I switch off with you? Yeah. And we would switch. And that was that's how I dealt with her. I wouldn't pack her groceries, and I wouldn't acknowledge her. I didn't have to. I didn't want to. And a kind of a funny thing, I took my job very seriously. I did. I think it has something to do with my work ethic, which all of a sudden I had one. I took my job very seriously, and I was not going to give her the delight of my packing skills. No way. And you could ask my buddy Keith Whittier. Shout out to Keith Whittier, who was on my podcast, Rolland Chidiac Connects. He'll tell you, because he was a packer at the time too, and he'd tell you I was dead serious about my job, and I would never pack for her. That's it.
Sweet revenge.
Thanks for letting me go down memory lane.
Dude, thanks for the ride. I got nothing else. I'll say, I'm sorry you were treated that way. And I just had somebody the other day say something like, but there's a gift in there. Something similar I was talking to them about. I'm like, but damn, that's bittersweet. Bittersweet's not even the right word. There's something cataclysmic about it. But I am sorry that happened to you.
And I want to be clear. I wasn't the little innocent. Like, I wasn't bad in that, like, I was disrespectful in class and causing problems. That was never me. But I also wasn't giving my schooling 110%. Mm-hmm. I was just there. I was a lost kid, man. Like, I was a lost teenager, like many teenagers can be. I was lucky I avoided drugs and alcohol. But, I wasn't there. I wasn't there to give it anything. So I'm not innocent in this whole situation. But I was just a kid. And they were responsible for taking care of me, and I don't think some of them did. I don't think they did. I don't think they didn't care, or they were dealing with their own life issues maybe. I don't know. Like my grade um 11 and 13 science teacher taught me biology. Great guy. I loved him. There were some teachers I really loved. I loved him. And when I was in grade 13, there was a rumor that he was getting divorced from his wife and he had 2 kids. And you know what? When I heard that, I was seriously hurt. I was sad for him. So there were teachers that I connected to probably more than they wanted me to. Like, I thought the man was a great man, great teacher. And I was sad that he had to leave school and go deal with that nonsense. You know, he had a family, but they were breaking up. Like, that hurt me.
Mm-hmm.
And he was still coming to school, teaching and doing what he could and treating people like humans, you know? So those people I stepped up for 100%. And it was my grade 13 physics and chemistry teacher that told me that my work ethic would excel me in university, and that high school wasn't built the way universities were built, and that my learning in high school didn't work, but my learning in university it fit perfectly. And he was so right. Man, I loved it. Go to a 3-hour lecture and then have a week to think about what was taught, what I needed to read, what I needed to think about, what I needed to do, the questions I had. I loved every minute of that. And I enjoyed my classes because I knew I was going to have 3 hours of getting pounded with academics, but then I had a whole week, 7 friggin' days to figure it out, to mull it over, to talk to people about it, to visit my professor during his office hours, to talk and ask questions and show my interest. That was the bomb. I loved every minute of that. But going to school every day and 80 minutes in this class and go home and do these 10 pages of homework, come back and do it again every day, I wasn't built for that. I wasn't built for that. But anyway, I was no angel. I'm still no angel. I will crush you if you get in my way. So just give me my fuel and get out of the way. You know? And I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and I'm not going to get into it, but I was listening. The guest appears to be a refined professional. But when I heard the guest's story about his life growing up, it was horrible. His life growing up was horrible. But you're not going to get that. You're not going to get that. So people who meet me every day, oh, Rolland's great. He's got a family. He's a hard worker. He does a podcast. Yada, yada, yada. They're not going to hear like what I had to go through, just like I'm not going to hear what they had to go through. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to know unless I sit down with them and they give me the goods. Right? And the ironic thing here is I'm talking to you, but this is available for anybody to listen to.
Mm-hmm.
My intention was to talk to you and nobody else. But here it is, available for everybody. But you know what? It's my life. There's nothing to be ashamed of. It's how I grew up. It's what I did when I was there. And I'm different now. And I've learned from it. And I like to think that I use it to benefit my career. I use it to benefit my professional, personal learning. Hopefully my family benefits from it. I think my family, they do pay for it a little bit because of the residual pieces there that just rear their ugly heads at certain times, you know, mm-hmm. where they're like, why are you acting like this? And it's like, oh God, I need to remember that I shouldn't look at my son as someone who's fueling me in a negative way. Mm-hmm. But that's the filter, and I got to change filters depending on where I am and who I'm with. So that's a learning for me. I'm still in the middle of that, but people are who they are, and you go from there. So this pandemic has to end because I don't think I can't do this every weekend. And you barely spoke today, and that's not good either because it's our podcast.
It's long game though, right? It's long game. We each get our moment of our podcast at some point. So I'm not bugged at all.
Thanks.
And I hope someone checks the story. I hope someone. I want this to be the Easter egg that someone finds, and they just get locked in, and they sort of hear their story outside their head. So that'll be a gift for somebody else.
And this certainly will be an Easter egg because I was looking at our blog the other day and I was enjoying just the pictures of our YouTube link to the video in every one. Man, it's so cool to see, like, there's just so many episodes that when somebody says, "Hey, remember you talked about this on this episode?" I'm like, "No, I don't remember." You mean season 2, episode 12? Unless you give it to me like that,
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about. I need to go back and look. And so, season 3, episode 23 was, a bit of Rolland goes back in time and tells you why he hates reading and writing in English episode. Unless you say season 3, episode 23. And now maybe I might remember this one a little bit deeper, but I don't think I'll actually remember the title. I'll just remember, I went off and I talked about some of my backstory, and that's it. That's all I remember.
Plus, it's multimodal. Like, part of it is you don't know until the end what I'm catching, like from the stuff that you're pitching. Like, you don't know. Like, it kind of comes to, if you see the picture, and then when I post up the link and there's a little blurb there, like adding another layer of what the conversation looked like from the outside. So yeah, it's hard to go back. I was just sort of flipping through back some of the pictures, and if I look at it, it sparks up thinking about fatherhood and school and relationships. But I would, even going back and seeing some of the pics in my sketchbook here, like, I would have to go back and probably I would have to see what you blogged, just to get some get that word wall going. But
Your sketches could be our book.
yeah.
You know that, right?
The prompts.
You know
for
that,
other
right?
people.
Like, no, that, yeah. Well, hey, if people can put out a book about sketch notes and the different sketch notes that have been created about different topics, why can't you put out a book about the sketches you've done of our podcast and the evolution of our podcast? I don't know why. I think you can. We just need to find the right people to do it. Even if we did it digitally, like, I don't think I have a picture of every single one of your sketch notes. And I know last season I put together a quick video of them, and I would love to do that now because how many episodes are we at now?
With this, like, 111, 112? Like, total number? I think it's about 112.
112, eh?
I think so. Yeah. Going by I think I can only, every once in a while I go back through the YouTube feed just to make sure everything is ported over onto the playlist for the podcast. And I think that count is either 111. This might be.
Okay. I know our first one, there's no video. There's just audio. And then after that, it's been video for the rest of them.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I agree.
Thanks, buddy.
You're welcome, man. I appreciate you digging deep on that stuff. Like, really do.
Thanks. It was, I feel more tired now than when we started.
It's that walking in the fresh air.
I can't wait to get outside today.
Yeah, I know. For sure.
The sun is shining. I'm feeling a bit better. I need to breathe in some of that fresh air.
Here, I'll show you what I scribbled.
I'd love to see it. Oh, interesting. I love it. When did it hit you that that's what you were going to draw?
When you first started talking about working with the kid in your class and seeing it was the idea of the different groups sort of someone perceiving that they would rather be over there than here. That's what kind of set the concept. And then it was just, I mean, at some point, come hell or high water, I get to a commitment point. I'm like, I just got to see this through and finish it as far as it being an art piece. That's my, if I'm tapping into your moment of don't tell me I can't do it, I officially have that mindset that I have to deliver something by the end of our conversation. So I do have that little bit of competitive mindset. So yeah, it was talking there, and then the layers just kept on coming. Originally, I will say, when my start with this was just the map. It wasn't until you were sitting outside the classroom that I made it into an actual book. So, and the extra layers on there. So that's where, and for anyone listening right now, I'm just showing the picture to Rolland, the video part. But the picture, yeah, I'll post out the picture. Yeah. So it did happen in certain layers. It changed into a book from just a topographical map. When you dove into your story about having to sit outside your classroom.
Right on. I love the evolution of that picture. Like, I love the evolution of the picture.
Mm-hmm.
Have you been doing it since day one?
Yeah, something. I think originally though, the ones, and I'd have to go find, I have other kind of journals off over there. Most of those were actually more heavily word based. So just kind of like, might have been a drawing of you, drawing of me. Originally, the design of it, the actual, initially when I did it, there was always I had a lot that there was like some sort of scribble of you and I in the actual picture. And then at some point, I don't think it was, definitely in tail end of season 2, I let go. I was just looking back, season 2, episode 36, season 2, episode 31. Oh man, you remember the Mos Eisley Cantina?
Yes.
I don't even know. Oh, Decoded. Yeah. So that would have been, I'm guessing, season 2? 2019. Yeah, that would have been season 2. I didn't even write the season on there.
Well, I have to throw this down.
Okay.
If you find the time, I know it's labor intensive, but if you find the time to put them somewhere where I can access them, I will totally video that. Like, but I know it means that you have to start looking through your sketchbooks. You have got to take the picture. You got to either text it to me or put it somewhere. Like, I get it. But if you do, I will, because talk about evolution.
I'll figure out a way. It's all it really does come down to is just a matter of, it's just a matter of grabbing like the digitals, and some of them I have the digitals, like they are, because originally I don't think I was posting up the digitals. Like, I don't know if,
yeah, like,
and then my Twitter feed, I sort of had that, got rid of my Twitter feed and flipped it. So I do have, I have all the pictures. So I know I have all the drawings in my journals there. You're right. It's just a matter of kind of going through and doing the scan of them, getting a good scan.
Even if if you put them somewhere central, like a shared Google Doc or something, where then I can just grab them in order and start to build. Because I know, like, it doesn't have to be a project that starts and ends on the same day. It can obviously go over amount of time, but because if you text them to me, like when I then take my pictures and I upload them to my computer, even for me, it's going to take time looking through my files of photos and my hard drive to find all of them. Like, I recognize it's work on both of our parts, but more so on your part because.
No, it's worthwhile. It's worthwhile. I would like to see them all in one space too. It's a funny thing to sort of just know they kind of exist somewhere, but not have direct access to being able to kind of flip through it in a really easy fashion, right?
Yeah, like, you know what, I picture like an art installation. Yeah. And they have like, well, this is art. Like, you have the video of us doing the podcast playing, and I can see it right now. Below it is another video that constantly is playing all the different sketches.
Right.
And it's just going as you and I are doing a podcast. And it's like such a growth, such an evolution that it makes me joyful, and it gives me like pleasure in watching people start a podcast. Because I think, do you know what you're potentially stepping into? Like the growth,
like where
experience.
you could run to with it.
Oh,
yeah,
dude. When I think back to I know we're only halfway through this season, but the first 2 seasons, like, I hope it continues to grow, and I hope that we continue to do this for as long as it works for us.
Yeah, and if it doesn't, I'm pretty sure it'll iterate into something else. Like if our creative past dictates our future, this in itself, this project, whatever this is, will evolve into something else again. Like it's just kind of the way we do.
Right.
So that's kind of crazy too, to think about it that way.
Okay.
All right.
Peace out, and I'll be talking to you sooner rather than later.
You know it, man. Okay, take care.
You too.